Hello, hello. Thanks for coming back to my channel. I'm making cookies today, peanut butter cookies. I started by turning the oven on to 375 degrees Fahrenheit. Now I'm cutting half a cup of butter, which is quite the task, considering butter does not necessarily fit into a measuring cup, but I think I got it. I slice it up pretty small because I normally pop it in the microwave for a few seconds, and I want it to melt evenly. I just find it easier to mix the ingredients for the cookies together when the butter is melted, rather than having cold, hard chunks of the butter in with everything. It's going in the microwave for a few seconds, about 30 to 45 seconds. When it comes out, it's mostly melted and we're ready for our other ingredients. So we're putting in 1¼ cup brown sugar, and I pack the brown sugar down so it's not loose, but it's quite packed into the measuring cup. And then I find it really satisfying to stir everything together, especially when we're combining something like sugar and melted butter. So I give it a quick stir. And now I'm going to add my peanut butter. So this recipe calls for 3/4 cup of peanut butter. And I'm using crunchy peanut butter because I feel like it just gives the cookies a little bit more texture. But the cookies are really good with smooth peanut butter as well. So then I just stir that around too for a second. I find it so satisfying to see all the ingredients being incorporated together. So then after this, I'm adding 3 tablespoons of milk. And I specifically am adding the milk before I add the egg because it is going to help cool down some of the melted butter, because the last thing we want is scrambled eggs in our cookie dough. So then I'm adding what's supposed to be a teaspoon of vanilla, but I always just eyeball it because I know fairly well what's roughly a teaspoon, and then I don't have to worry about getting a teaspoon. It's just for the flavor anyway. So I'm stirring that around a little to evenly cool off the dough. And then I am grabbing the egg. I'm actually using a duck egg here, which might sound gross, but it's really good for baking because it has a lot of yolk, which makes the cookies really chewy and fudgy. Alright, next I'm adding 1¾ cup of flour. Just white, plain, all-purpose flour. And I'm adding 3/4 teaspoon of baking soda. And then gotta get it just right. After that, I'm going to add 3/4 teaspoon of salt as well. And this one's a little more rough because it doesn't really matter as precisely. It's more just for the flavor. So then we're going to combine all of that together. And we're going to get a really nice cookie dough. So I haven't made peanut butter cookies in a long time, there's something so special and so nostalgic about a good peanut butter cookie. So I'm excited to try these. Okay, once I get this all mixed up, I'm going to put some parchment paper on a baking sheet, as you see here. And I'm going to start rolling them out into little cookie balls. And the measurements here are not super exact. And it doesn't necessarily matter what size they are. The most important thing is that they're pretty even in size. Otherwise, you're going to have some burnt cookies and some undercooked cookies on the same sheet. So sometimes I do small cookies, sometimes I do bigger cookies, but the most important thing is that they're pretty much all the same size. And then if you are making them smaller or bigger, they're going to take a little bit longer or less time to bake depending on what the size is. So I switched up my pattern on the baking sheet, and we are just rolling out a few more. I think I'm trying to fit 12 on this one, and then to the remaining ones I'm going to add some chocolate chips, and the other ones are going to be peanut butter chocolate chip cookies, which are also delicious, but I didn't want to do it for all of them because that's kind of just more like not as nostalgic. It's not for everyone. It's a little more funky. So now I'm adding the chocolate chips, and I meant to add about a half a cup, but it really turned out to be almost a whole cup. But I think that they're pretty good regardless. It's kind of like a Reese's cup, but in a cookie version, which is totally what we want. And oh my gosh, there's something so satisfying about watching chocolate chips being incorporated into cookie dough. So now I'm doing the same thing on this baking sheet. I've got another piece of parchment paper, and really the parchment paper will help them cook pretty evenly, not get burnt on the bottom, not get stuck to the sheet, and it also makes for a really easy cleanup because all you do is slide off the parchment paper and your pan is totally clean. So that's a great hack. And I decided to make these ones with the chocolate chips a bit bigger, if you can tell. I think that I was running out of patience. I didn't want to make them as small for many reasons, but one of the reasons is because I was anxious to get them in the oven and to try them, because as you can tell by the clock on the stove, it was about 5:45, and I was starting to get pretty hungry for supper and pretty antsy to try these cookies, which, spoiler alert, now that it's later and I am editing this video, I've tried the cookies and they were delicious. So I can stand by this recipe. I'll read you what the rest of the recipe says here. It says drop by rounded teaspoonfuls. Okay, so I just kind of eyeballed it. But if you want to know what they're supposed to be, it's rounded teaspoonfuls. And then it says, if desired, press lightly with a floured fork in a crisscross pattern. So I did the crisscross pattern, but I did not flour my fork, which if I would have read this a little more closely, then I would have, and it would have been a lot easier, because as you can see, my fork was severely sticking to every single cookie, and it made the whole process take a lot longer. So, hot tip, flour your fork before doing this. And then it says once you've done that, we're going to bake them in the oven at 375 degrees. As I said before, we're going to bake them for 7 to 8 minutes until they're just beginning to brown. And the trick is you're going to want to take them out before they look totally done, because they continue to bake on the sheet for a little while after. You take them out when they're still hot. So this was pretty much 8 minutes. Might not seem like that long, but you'll see that they still look kind of gooey, a little bit shiny, but they are a little brown around the edges, so that's your cue. Okay, so I'm unloading them soon here in a second onto a cooling rack, and I don't know if you can tell, but they do look a little shiny still, but that's okay. That means they're going to be chewy and not super crunchy, which is the way that I like the cookies. So I'm unloading them here, and I'm going to try one really soon. They were so good. So if you want to try this recipe, it's super simple and they're super good. I think from start to finish, it took me about 30 minutes from when I got out my dish to when they were ready to eat. So that's not bad at all. And they taste delicious. Thanks for watching.